It it is middle of August and still topping out mid 90s. Hot weather, hot weather. All right, I wanted to do a video on how nightmares are rocket fuel for healing. And that you can be, I almost even don't want to say it, eventually you can come to a point of appreciation or gratitude. Oof, that doesn't even feel right to say that. Let me just lay it out, and we'll see if we come back to that point. But nightmares are a good sign, potentially. I would say categorically, just a good sign. But that's kind of a big statement. Not that they feel good, and even that term nightmare, I've come to recognize as come to see as a very low resolution. Oh boy, my speaker was covered. Hope the audio's all right. Got my professional camera set up here. Yeah, nightmares and dreams, very low resolution words, and they don't convey the kind of nuance and the depth and the multidimensionality of what's happening at night. But it's just conventional shorthand. So, especially on an awakening path, on a healing path, because what happens at night is some of the rigidity of consciousness softens. Oh, I put a hard T in there. Softens. Yeah, your consciousness opens up, and it'd be better to say what happens at night is you enter into various depths of consciousness. You could say various realms, especially if you're really prone to, or maybe for everybody on the healing path, but for some people, there seems to be more of a, I almost want to say shamanic, or some people just have, it seems that some people just have more, I don't know, mystical isn't quite the right word, shamanic is closer. I don't like the term astral, but some people just seem to be more naturally somehow open to other realms, other dimensions. And that's really what's happening at night, to varying degrees, depending on the individual, depending on the night, depending on a number of things. But just to kind of put a little bit of a roomier framing around this is that you are dropping into, and I think what I've noticed is the first, because I've been waking up periodically for a variety of reasons for the past couple of years. I'll wake up 2, 3, sometimes 4 times during the night, and it sucks. I don't like it, but there are some advantages that it provides, spiritually speaking. But it's given me a way to, because when you wake up, you transition out of that sleep state, and you have these intermittent waking periods throughout the night, gives you an ability to kind of chart the unconscious state, the sleep state, in a different way, because you kind of have brackets uh, around your sleeping. That makes sense. But what I've noticed is that you seem to immerse most deeply in infinite being and God's being and consciousness at the earliest part of the night, so when you first fall asleep, and it's like you slowly move up through the layers. I've noticed, each subsequent sleep session throughout the night, it seems to be, it's like if it was the ocean, I seem to be rising a little bit in consciousness each time. And there's a lot more I could say about that, but let me think where I'm going with this. Yeah, I guess just to point out that you're sojourning, you're traveling through various densities, various layers of consciousness, from very deep alternate realities, more primary, more fundamental aspects of creation, in these subtler states while you're asleep, maybe formless awareness, total objectlessness, so no trace is really left on the memory. But then through it, you can traverse some very wild territory, very wild things. Again, psychedelic is a good word for it, shamanic. Yeah, and I just point that out because dreams, people say, oh, it's just a dream. we just have such a poverty of understanding on these issues. The language is so impoverished, just so doesn't capture the vast possibilities. But and I've even noticed some distinctions there too between going into more maybe archetypical realms, or not even maybe archetypical, but transpersonal realms that seem to be part of a larger map of creation, and those happen in kind of the earlier parts of the night, typically, earlier to middle. So there's kind of this transpersonal that's not really connected to your ego, not really connected to your life stream in that direct of a way. You can have really far out experiences. Divorced from, somewhat separate from, or seemingly wholly separate from your waking reality. And then kind of in the perhaps more shallow states. Shallow doesn't feel quite the right word, but for me, again, this would be more towards the later part of the sleep, so getting into the early hours of the day towards morning. And those dreams tend to have more of a self flavor. They tend to be more connected. I think it was Freud, although this would have been in German, so it's a translation. I don't know what his word was, but I think Freud or maybe Jung talked about day residues, that dreams are kind of the working out of day residues. And that does seem to be the case, kind of at the more upper levels, when you're kind of re-emerging back into waking consciousness. If it was the ocean, this would be the, not the depths, but, getting towards the surface. So there seems to be, just a variety of different things. It's hard to map it out because it's all different physics and it's more subtle. And but there seems to be, I don't know if I want to make it so starkly as this, but some kind of a split between what's ego related, you're related to your life stream, related to this waking reality. You could say personal in that sense. And then there's these other kind of transpersonal realms, just where you're kind of far out in the cosmos. But one thing, and there's different ways to frame it. I'm trying to be as authentic. I'm fighting the impulse to psychologize it, because I really don't think that's the best map. I think it's really imperfect and potentially quite, in some ways, fundamentally just not the right way to look at it. Though, yeah, again, there's utility in different maps, I guess, but just trying to be as authentic to my experience. It seems what's happening is you're journeying into different depths of creation. And there's the impulse to say, well, this is all part of your own psychology and your own shadow and your own working it out. I don't agree. I just don't agree. I feel the pull to psychologize it that way and to put it in those terms. And it's not the end of the world, however you want to see it, but I'm just putting it how I experience it and what feels, after a lot of investigation, what feels right to me. But just to speak in more psychological terms, that concept of the shadow, when you start to wake up, in an abiding way, moving in that direction, trying your best to heal in a sincere way, what's going to happen is, and don't blame me, I didn't start this fire. I didn't create this. I would never have designed things this way. It's foolish. Not foolish, it's fucked up. It's a fucked up design, in my opinion. But what's going to happen is it's going to stir up, when you go to sleep, it's like the boundaries open up a little bit on all the control mechanisms, the self-defense mechanism, is that the term? All the ego structures, they loosen up when you go to sleep. And so one way to look at it is, in order to heal, you're going to have to face hell. You're going to have to transmute the darkness that we all carry inside of us through conditioning, through being on this, inside this insane madhouse planet, madhouse realm that we're in, inside the madness of this species. We've just onboarded so much crap. That's sort of, running the show behind the scenes. And so as you heal and you relax and you dissolve some of the partitions and divisions in your consciousness, this material is going to come up. And at night, it's definitely going to come up. That's the perfect opportunity, because you're even less defended in an egoic sense. You're also potentially, some of us, I don't know what the determinants of this are. I've got some theories, but going to face spiritual warfare. I hesitate to say that. And again, choose your map. I'm just trying to be authentic and real about this, but yeah, you're going to face attacks. You're going to face darkness. You're going to face sociopathic, psychopathic, potentially. Again, there's no rules on this, and I'm guessing, yeah, it's just so hard. I don't have any data on this, just anecdotes, and having been around this, my own experiences, having, been engaging with this for a long time, seems some percentage you're going to face some some hell. Now, some of that is, again, it's going to be ego related. It's going to be connected to your life stream. It's going to be the working out of old traumas, old residues that are clearly familiar to your incarnation, right? Your life. Traumas from when you were young, relationships that were unresolved. And the Dream Theater, was that 90s band? The theater of your mind at night, the theater of your consciousness in which all this plays out, is going to bring forth, a lot of that material connected to old traumas, sometimes maybe direct replays, but sometimes, just almost like consciousness is riffing on a theme. And but again, then there's other categories of darkness and hell and things that I feel is actually unhealthy to ascribe to the self. Things that are just wholly other, that are not you, that are other. Big picture, is it all you? Well, yeah, in a sense, it's all part of consciousness. It's all different modulations of consciousness. But the moment we go there, it kind of shuts down we lose all distinctions in language and talking about things, and the practical points that one can offer on the path just become, it's not really useful. I mean, it's majorly useful and important insight to have, but relatively speaking, to heal, you have to recognize all the different layers of creation, including this life stream that you have, and working through that is a part of, so you can't just end run it. You can't just bypass all of that just for the absolute, conclusion. Yeah. So yeah, you can have really shocking, awful, horrific experiences, both personal to your own stuff and transpersonal, as I would put it. I would never have designed it this way. Never, ever, ever. Especially as you get more in touch with the innocence of your soul and you look at other people and you see their innocence and you see little babies, and it's like, fuck, man, no, I would never design. And you see the hell that, people go through in this life, and it's just awful, man. It's just really awful. But yeah, you may well confront a lot of this stuff. Hell realms, hellish realities. Again, sociopathic creatures, beings, seem to have a totally inverted morality, that they take delight in immiserating people. And you may not encounter all this, there's no fixed rule about this, but if you are, that's rough. Let me just say that's rough. I don't know how much further I should go into that, but the point I want to make is that it's a good thing, in a sense. Follow me here. It's a good thing that this is happening, because it means you're healing, you're unlocking the wounds inside of you, the trauma inside of you, the collective madness, whatever is surfacing. And so the Aikido move to make with all of this, the tantric move to make, the healing step to take, first of all, be gentle with yourself. Be human. if you just, had a brutal experience in another realm, or just awful nightmare, however you want to think of that, sucks. It really sucks. Being a warrior on the path isn't about keeping a stiff upper lip or being stoic. I mean, those can be good qualities and traits too, but there has to be a tenderness. You don't want to lose track of your own humanity going through hell. I mean, yeah, be courageous. If you're on this path, you're courageous, period, already. You don't need anyone to affirm that, but courage is definitely a part of it. But there's a time also for being human and being human to yourself. And shitty situations are shitty, they suck. And it's really important to be able to grieve and to mourn and to tend to your wounds. Ministrate, is that the word? Minister to your pain, to acknowledge your pain, to grieve. But that's one of the gifts of these realms and these experiences, is they can really, there's many things I could say about this, but one is that it really shows, it can really open you up to how innocent you are, because you come across these just totally profane, evil, debauched, debased, dark, violent, horror show beings and realities. And that's not you. See, that's the thing I don't like about it's all part of your shadow. You don't have to identify with any of that. That's not you. No. You're you're an innocent, at your depth, you're just an innocent being. At least that's one of the things that I've come away with from some of these experiences, and grieving it is like, fuck, man. That sort of, can't think of the right word right now. That kind of evil, that's not me. Now, do we get lost and confused and participate to some degree in evil, in madness? Of course we do. But these realms can really contextualize the depth of depravity and the depth of evil, and can kind of, by way of contrast, shine a light on your own innocence. And anyways, but to speak in more kind of just down to earth practical terms, which was really the initial point I wanted to make with this whole video, is, let's just say you had an awful experience at night, right? And for me, I have these intermittent, it's a hard word for me, intermittent waking up periods in the middle of the night. And so let's say that you're in that position, have an awful experience, and you wake up in the middle of the night. Go at your own pace with what I'm about to say. Be gentle, be skillful, be kind to yourself. But more and more, you can move in the direction that I'm going to try to describe here, which is not to run from where you're at when you wake up. There might be a tendency there to Um, I don't know, reach for your phone, reach for your computer, maybe. Some kind of a coping strategy when you're in that kind of distress. Go and eat something, I don't know, smoke or drink or whatever the vice is, to get some distance or relief from that pain. And some of that, I don't want to condemn that either, because some of that can be skillful. And I don't know if I want to say skillful, but you don't want to just, out of, yeah, it's hard to talk about this, in a nuanced way, because there's just so many possibilities here. But you never want to just remove a coping mechanism cold turkey, or rarely. I mean, it's usually just not a good idea to do that, because it's there for a reason, because you're suffering and you've got pain, and so you want to work in a compassionate way with yourself and gradually. So don't hear me as like outright condemning coping mechanisms or something like that. Yes, eventually you transform them and you heal enough such that they become irrelevant and they drop away. But let me just paint the picture kind of, in maybe the stark, not extreme, but the direction to head toward, the ideal. Even ideal doesn't feel like the right word, but you wake up, you've had a bad dream, bad experience in another realm, been attacked, had some traumatic or lonely or just awful, whatever, horror show experience. Can you surrender to that? Can you not move? Can you not run? Surrender into where you're at. Again, in a tender way. Because the natural reaction that we I don't know if it's natural, but the sort of typical reaction is that, we want to run from discomfort and pain. But if you can stay with it, see, these things come up into the surface of your consciousness to be transformed. To be released. And what happens is when you run into a coping mechanism, you don't allow for, in a way, you don't allow for that transformation. It's a missed opportunity. I know it's kind of a harsh thing to say, but let's just say there is an opportunity there, which is these bad things come up. And now what does that surrender look like? Well, you just surrender, you just stop, you don't move. But it's not a rigid thing, it's a soft thing. And what'll happen is if you can relax your body, if you can just stop where you're at, your mind's going to try to distract, your consciousness is going to shoot up into your mind, into the images, or into a coping mechanism to distract, whatever. But if you can just commit to burning in the fire, commit to relaxing, commit to softening, see, there's a seed energy, there's an energetic signature, there is a feeling tone, a vibrational tone that is at the root, that is the seed. It's almost like there's this seed vibration on a subtler level, beneath thoughts, beneath images, getting into feelings, emotions, and just into, kind of even beneath that in a way. It all kind of blends together in a certain way, but just kind of at an energetic level. There's a seed energy behind these experiences that it's almost like the seed. It's almost like you can visualize as there's this little seed of whatever darkness, madness. I mean, even to label it becomes a hindrance, but so let's just say that there's a seed there, and out of that blossoms, and that's probably not that doesn't evoke quite the right, out of that seed projects, or yeah, we'll just say grows the nightmare, the horror show experience, yeah. And so the way to heal it, it's not through dream analysis. Please, please, please. You don't need to go into that. I'm sure that's useful. Again, yeah, I'm sure there's a place for that, but it gets simpler and simpler on the path. And in some ways, that's the psychological ego or the spiritual ego trying to co-opt the path and saying, we got to get sophisticated on this and analyze the dreams. Yeah, and yeah, I'll probably speak out of the other side of my mouth here in a moment and say there is some utility in that. But the direct path, the real juicy stuff, the real healing path is going to be accessing that seed vibration. And so what is that in more practical terms? It's the feeling tone. So you wake up, you're just rattled from this whole experience. You've got this jumble of this phantasmagoria, here's a good word, of images and whatever that's happened in these other realms, these other in the nightmares. But there's they're permeating that, under that, infused throughout that, there's a feeling tone. And it becomes more and more intuitive and more, see, none of this is analytical. So these words, again, it's not about the words, it's about the experience. And so you can access one kind of intermediate step. And I'm trying to keep this as step-free as possible because it's not a 20-step process. It's not about psychoanalyzing or dream analysis. You just more and more learn to go directly into the feeling tone. So let's say you had this crazy dream, you wake up, there's a feeling tone, but you're having a hard time accessing it. Again, just with a few experiences, it's going to become really much easier to just directly go where I'm pointing. But you can ask, what is the overriding feeling I'm having? And keep it simple, one-word answers. Loneliness, that's going to be a lot of them. Loneliness, fear, sadness. And use that inquiry to point you into the experience. Don't get stuck with that label. It's not about, okay, now I've captured it in this word sadness. No, okay, sadness. Now, how do I experience that? Where is that for me? Where is that vibration? Can I feel that directly? Dropping the labels, can I go directly with my awareness into the feeling tone, the vibrational quality of that emotion that we're labeling loneliness or fear or grief? Anger, whatever it is. I'm trying to think of some other. And another inquiry, let me wrap this up. So, yeah, and so that you narrow it down to one or two words. Maybe it's a little bit of a mix, and maybe there's a few layers. There's fear, and under that there's sorrow, and but you just try to keep it as primary emotions as you can get it, and then you shed all of that. You found the fear, you found the loneliness. Go directly into the energy if you can. Another inquiry that could be helpful, again, it's not about inquiries, but it potentially could be helpful. And connected to, trying to figure out what the emotion is. A further step you could ask is, Who is the fearful one? Who is the lonely one? Where is it in me that I am lonely? Where is it in me that I am afraid? And you can sort of, there's a little bit of a visualization of, you can imagine, these parts inside of you as lost children, or see yourself, because the emotions are happening to someone. Ultimately not. Ultimately that gets seen through, and this is the process for how you do it actually. But who is the fearful one? And you go into it's like you, with your awareness, you welcome them, you invite them forward, or you go to them and you kind of wrap them up and you let them share, you let them shake, you let them cry. You let that stuff empty out. And that, all that stuff, all that darkness, all that unprocessed energy, that is kind of the seed, that's the soil out of which these, is noxious the right word? This dark foliage, these dark blooms, these dark blossoms, these dark plants of nightmares and alternate realities, hell realms. It sort of springs forth from that, is one way to look at it. And you don't have to get involved in any of that stuff. That's not you. You don't have to worry about it. All you have to do is comfort the one who is hurting, comfort the one who is suffering, the one who's afraid, the one who's lonely. Just go to them, comfort them, let them grieve, let them cry, let them shake, curl up into the fetal position, let them feel safety, let them feel comfort. And you can feel the energy integrating, transmuting, releasing. And it can be very brutal. This is tough work. This is big work. This is important work, you know. Who on earth is up for this? Those who are suffering, you know. Yeah, but more and more you learn, just, you know, you wake up from an awful experience. There will be some natural resistance to going into it because it sucks. Again, fuck this design, dude. It's just so shitty in some ways, most ways, in many ways. But rather than falling into your addictions, rather than falling into your avoidance patterns, more and more you have the capacity within you to stay with the hurt, stay with the pain, stay with the discomfort, stay with the suffering, you know, inside of you. And that's how you heal it. You just be with it. You just surrender into it. You feel it. That's all it is, really. I mean, and it's going to feel wretched. But the thing is, it's already inside of you. It's already happened. It's already happening. It's already driving the show unconsciously. And so you can start to reorient your relationship to these experiences, because you see that these are these experiences surfacing in your consciousness to be liberated. And that's a good thing. It doesn't feel good. It never starts to feel good, but more and more, and this is where I started with this idea of you can be grateful. It still doesn't even feel quite right to say it that way. But more and more, it's like when you go to get a massage. You've got all kinds of knots in your body. In fact, I think this analogy is, it's like the exact correspondence on the so-called physical level of what we're doing here. Is you're unwinding all these knots in your consciousness on subtler levels of your being. And the kind of most surface level is like getting a massage, and it hurts, obviously, when they're going into the knot, but you know that's part of the healing process, and that's opening things up so that the energy starts to move and drains out of you and transforms. And so you can sort of psychologically, in a sense, reorient, you know, recontextualize, reorient how you see the pain. because it's an opening. It's a chance for transformation. Yeah. That the darkness is arising to be released. And really, yeah, and all you need to do is just soften, feel, comfort yourself, let these things come up, let yourself cry, let the nausea move through you, the waves of nausea, the waves of heat, the waves of disgust, fear, pain, sorrow, grief, loneliness. Touch into it. You can, you can, in a sense, more passive isn't quite the right word, but there's kind of just this softening, opening, allowing for stuff to continue to surface, those energies to move through you. You just keep softening. Mind wants to fixate. Soften, 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 soften. You just keep opening, softening, allowing. And then there's kind of a further step you can take as you get more experience. And really just doing this a few times, you'll get the whole process. If it sounds complicated, it's not. It's really not. But so there's the kind of allowing, and that's critical, surrender. But then there's a further step of directly going with your awareness to where the hurting places are. And a clue that I could give is you can access it usually through finding where the pain is most vivid in your body. And often that's going to be kind of in the center of your chest, heart center, and then kind of falling back behind the body. That's where a lot of this stuff is, kind of all throughout the torso, stomach. And so you kind of go like a laser with your awareness and find these vibrations, and just by penetrating or touching, merging, for some reason I don't like that word, but penetrating, touching these vibrations with your awareness, it starts to open up, they start to move and digest. So like shining a laser on ice or something like that. But yeah, just to reiterate the caution about being overly, I can't think of the right term. Like you're storming the gates of heaven. There can be that kind of mentality, like, I'm just going to storm my way through all this darkness. No, it's a much softer, more gentle process. It's tender, and it's human. It's like fully welcoming your humanity. You're not supposed, if you've just been through hell in these different states, you're not supposed to feel great. It's not about being tough in that sense. It's about being, well, yeah, there's a place for that. Well, it's about being human. What are you actually feeling? I feel scared. I feel frightened. I feel sad. I feel hurt. I feel shook up. Allow yourself to be really authentic about how you feel. So I'll just put that caution in there. Now I've done other videos about what to do while you're in these realms, and how to handle these realms, and how to work in these realms in a sense, and defend and transform. I think I did a video called Spiritual Attack. and another video on etheric implants, or I don't know. Anyways, so that's a whole nother topic of discussion. Yeah, spiritual attack, I think, is one of the videos you could look at, because that's a whole another video. That's a whole nother topic to go into. So this is mostly about what do you do after you've had the experience. Although some of these principles apply during the experience. Anyways, let me just cut it off there. So, all right, take care.